The vast, uncharted expanse of space hummed with an eerie, unfamiliar quiet. The Vigilance, a colossal warship of human design, floated at the edge of the known universe, its engines dormant, its hull scarred from countless battles. Its crew, once bustling with activity, had been reduced to mere whispers. The deadly silence of deep space had settled upon them, a haunting reminder that they were no longer masters of the void. Captain Rena Yarrow paced in her command center, her sharp gaze sweeping over the empty star maps projected before her. The dark matter storms of the Nebulan Rift had claimed the lives of countless fleets before, but this mission was supposed to be different. This was supposed to be the moment humanity's warships would take their place at the apex of galactic power. But now it felt like the end was near. "Captain, the scanner arrays are picking up strange readings," Commander Jackson Hale's voice echoed through the bridge, breaking Rena's reverie. "Strange readings?" Rena's voice was steady but laced with suspicion. "What kind of strange?" Hale hesitated, his face pale beneath the glow of the holographic screens. "We've detected massive energy signatures, coming from a region just outside the rift. It's not like anything we've encountered before. These signatures, they don't match any known species or technology." Rena's eyes narrowed. Her mind raced through the countless possibilities. Were they dealing with a new alien force, one capable of manipulating energy on a scale beyond their comprehension? Or something even worse, a force older than the stars themselves? "How long until we reach the source of these readings?" she asked, her tone crisp. "At current speed, just over 6 hours," Hale responded. "But Captain, there's more." Rena turned sharply. "Go on." "The energy source is moving. It's coming closer. And it's accelerating at a rate that defies all known physics." The captain's heart skipped a beat. She quickly straightened, her mind flashing through tactical calculations. "Set course for the energy source. Increase speed to maximum. I want a full crew alert, and let's make sure we're ready for whatever this is. If there's a threat, we need to neutralize it before it becomes a problem." The ship shuddered as the engines roared to life, cutting through the emptiness of space. Rena stood at the forefront of the bridge, watching as the stars outside stretched into lines, pulling them closer toward the unknown. There was a feeling in the air, something she couldn't quite place, like the quiet before a storm. Her instincts were telling her they were being watched. But by who or what she had no idea. "Captain, I recommend deploying the fighter squads," Lieutenant Cale Marlowe suggested, his voice calm but urgent. "If we are dealing with a hostile force, the Vigilance's heavy artillery may not be enough. We'll need the agility of the fighters to scout ahead." Rena considered it for a moment before nodding. "Deploy the fighters, but keep them within 100 kilometers of the ship. I don't want any rogue craft getting too far ahead of us. We're moving into uncharted space. I don't trust the unknown." As the fighters were launched into the abyss, Rena's thoughts turned inward. What was the true nature of the energy signatures? And why had they appeared now, after centuries of peace? Humanity had conquered much of the galaxy, secured trade routes, terraformed planets, and established a galactic federation that seemed unbreakable. But this was something different. This was a threat with no origin, no explanation. Something that didn't belong in the vast order they had built. In the cockpit of the Vigilance's lead fighter, Lieutenant Marlowe scanned the stars through his helmet's visor. His ship hummed with a smooth, mechanical rhythm, and he adjusted the throttle, urging the craft forward. Ahead of him, the space between the stars seemed to ripple, as though reality itself was bending. "Strange," he muttered. "The stars don't behave like this. I've never seen this pattern before." As the fighter squadron advanced toward the source of the strange readings, a ripple of energy suddenly erupted from the depths of space, an unnatural pulse that shot through the fabric of reality itself. The entire fleet shuddered as the disturbance washed over them, followed by a momentary blackout across all systems. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, the lights flickered, and the ship felt like it was falling through a void of absolute nothingness. Then, as quickly as it began, the storm receded, and the Vigilance's systems flickered back to life. But it was too late to avoid the inevitable. A massive shadow emerged from the abyss. At first it was merely a silhouette, an indistinct shape of unimaginable size. But then it became clearer, and Rena's breath caught in her throat as she saw it. The shadow was here. "All hands brace for impact." Rena shouted, her voice cold with command. It had begun. The fight for survival in the infinite void was no longer a possibility, it was now a brutal, unavoidable reality. And humanity's warships, their pride and strength, would soon be tested like never before. The battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin. The Vigilance shook violently as the shadow loomed larger in the viewport, its form becoming clearer with every passing second. The energy pulse had been a warning, a sign of its arrival. But the scale of what they faced now was beyond anything Captain Rena Yarrow could have prepared for. It was not merely a ship. It was something far more ancient, far more sinister. Captain, incoming fire. Commander Hale's voice was strained as the first salvo of energy blasts erupted from the shadow. The sheer force of the impact rocked the ship, sending Rena stumbling briefly before she regained her footing. "Shields up, full power," she ordered, her eyes locked on the view screen. The shield systems hummed to life, but the energy of the enemy's weaponry was overwhelming. The Vigilance's shields flickered, struggling to absorb the barrage, before the energy pulse seemed to dissipate, like a ripple of water across a still lake. "Report." Rena snapped. "Shields are at 60% and holding," Hale replied. "Hull integrity is stable, but we've lost one of the forward thrusters. We're drifting into the shadow's path. Deploy the fighter wings." "We need to buy time," Rena commanded, her heart pounding. The ship's engines were faltering and they had no way of outrunning this threat. The Vigilance was built for battle, but this was different. As the fighter squadrons scrambled into the blackness of space, their weapons igniting in a flurry of light, Rena's thoughts raced. The shadow, whatever it was not just attacking with raw power. There was something calculated, methodical, behind its every move. It knew exactly how to disable them, how to strike at their weakest points. "Lieutenant Marlowe," Rena called over the comms, her voice steady despite the rising chaos. "Get those fighters in close. I want you to coordinate with the fleet and take out whatever weapon systems it's using." Marlowe's voice crackled through. "Understood, Captain. But I've never seen anything like this. Its weapons, there's no tech signature. It's like they're coming from nowhere." "Just find a way to destroy it, Marlowe," Rena replied, her jaw clenched. "We don't have the luxury of time." The fighter pilots swarmed around the enemy vessel, their laser beams piercing the void, but every shot seemed to disappear into the endless black. The shadow absorbed the incoming fire effortlessly, almost as if it were intangible. Each fighter's weapons made no impact, only causing small ripples of light to flicker around the shadow's surface before vanishing altogether. On the bridge, Rena's mind raced. The creature, or ship, or whatever it was, had to have a weakness. It was too large to be entirely impervious. There had to be a way to break through. But every attempt they made only seemed to provoke it further. And then, just as Rena was about to issue another command, a new signal flashed on her screen, a distress signal. It came from the fighter squadron's leader, Lieutenant Marlowe. "Captain, we've got a problem. I don't know what we're up against, but it's..." His voice was cut off abruptly by a deafening static noise. The feed died, and Rena's stomach twisted with a mixture of dread and disbelief. "No," she whispered. She had known Marlowe for years. He was one of the best pilots the fleet had. To lose contact with him so suddenly without a trace, something wasn't right. "Status report on the fighter squadron." Rena barked. She couldn't afford to lose focus. They needed every fighter at their disposal if they were to have any chance against this thing. "All fighters have been compromised, Captain," Hale reported grimly. "We've lost contact with the entire wing. The shadow, it's not just attacking our ships. It's scrambling our communications, disabling all external systems. We're blind out there, Captain." Rena felt a chill crawl down her spine. The situation was worsening fast. The shadow was systematically neutralizing everything they threw at it. It wasn't just a matter of firepower anymore. It was as if the enemy was toying with them, dissecting their tactics one by one, pulling apart their every advantage. "We can't just wait for it to finish us off," Rena muttered, her voice low but full of resolve. "We need to figure out what we're really up against here. This creature, or ship, it's not just another enemy. It's something older. Something that exists beyond conventional warfare." "Captain," Hale said, his voice trembling, "this thing, this shadow, whatever it is, it's not just a weapon. It's alive. And it knows we're here. It's hunting us." Rena's heart dropped into her stomach. Alive. The word hung in the air like a curse. They weren't fighting against a mindless warship or an alien fleet. They were facing something sentient, something that knew fear, knew strategy, and most terrifying of all, knew them. "Helm, turn the ship," Rena commanded. "We need to get away from this thing, now. Put everything you've got into evasive maneuvers." As the Vigilance shifted course, Rena stared out at the vast, infinite blackness of space. The shadow was still there, following their every move undeterred. It was relentless. The fight for survival had only just begun, and the stakes had never been higher. But the real question remained, what did this thing want? And how far would it go to make sure humanity was never a threat again? The Vigilance strained under the sudden course change, its engines roaring to life as the ship hurtled toward an uncertain fate. Captain Rena Yarrow gripped the armrests of her command chair, her knuckles white with the tension. Outside, the stars twisted and stretched into lines as the ship accelerated, dodging another energy pulse from the shadow. The Vigilance was fast, but it was clear that the shadow was faster. Its dark form loomed at the edge of her view, relentless, like a predator chasing its prey. "Shields at 40%, Captain," Hale reported, his voice tense but controlled. "We're holding, but not for long." Rena nodded grimly. They were running out of time, and every decision now carried the weight of their survival. Status of the remaining fighters? "Scattered and damaged," Lieutenant Tessa Markov replied from her station. "The Shadow's interference with our communications and targeting systems has completely crippled our fighter squads. We're down to just a handful of survivors, Captain. No chance of regrouping." Rena's gaze hardened as she focused on the view screen, her mind racing through potential strategies. There had to be a way to fight back, but they couldn't keep running forever. They needed to turn the tide soon. "Revert to long-range weapons," she ordered. "Bring the railguns online and target the Shadow's hull. If we can just break through its exterior, maybe we can find a weakness." "Captain," Hale spoke again, his voice laced with uncertainty. "We've already fired everything we have and it's barely leaving a dent. This thing, it's not like anything we've encountered before. Its structure doesn't respond to conventional weapons." "I know," Rena replied coldly, her mind racing. The Shadow was more than just a ship. It was a living, breathing entity with defenses beyond human comprehension. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Just as she prepared to issue another order, the ship lurched violently, throwing everyone off balance. The overhead alarms blared and the lights flickered momentarily. A loud, high-pitched hum filled the air, accompanied by a strange, vibrating resonance that seemed to come from the very walls of the ship. "Report," Rena barked. "Captain?" Hale's voice rose in alarm. "The Shadow, it's initiating some kind of wave pattern. We're being pulled toward it. Gravity wells, impossible ones, are being generated around us. Our engines are struggling to compensate." The Vigilance groaned as it was dragged toward the massive Shadow, its controls increasingly unresponsive. The ship was no longer merely in danger of being destroyed, it was being pulled apart by forces that defied the laws of physics. The Shadow wasn't just a weapon or a vessel. It was manipulating the very fabric of reality itself. "Hold on," Rena shouted, gripping her console as the ship bucked under the intense gravitational pull. "We can't let it drag us into its core. We need to break free." "Too late, Captain," Hale's voice was tight with fear. "We're entering its event horizon. Whatever's inside, it's not just a ship. It's a singularity. It's a black hole." Rena's breath caught in her throat. Black hole. The sheer impossibility of it made her head spin. They were in the grasp of a force older than stars. The concept of gravity, space, and time itself seemed to warp and twist around the Shadow, bending all logic to its will. "Shut down the engines," Rena commanded. "Everything to auxiliary power. Cut all non-essential systems. We need to stop our forward momentum before we're consumed." But it was already too late. The gravitational pull was too powerful. The Vigilance was no longer a ship, it was a toy in the hands of a malevolent force. As the ship continued to spiral toward the center of the growing singularity, the crew was thrust into a suffocating quiet. The hum of the engines, once steady, became muffled. The lights dimmed. The sensation of time itself seemed to slow. And then, just as the last shred of hope flickered in Rena's chest, a new signal emerged on the ship's sensors. Faint, distant, but unmistakably human. A distress signal. "Captain, we've got another signal," Tessa said, her voice barely audible. "It's coming from inside the Shadow." Rena's eyes widened in disbelief. "Inside?" "Yes, Captain," Tessa confirmed, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's faint, but it's definitely human. It's encoded in the same frequency as our comm systems. It's a beacon." The revelation struck like a bolt of lightning. Was there a survivor inside the Shadow? Or was it a trap? Either way, they couldn't ignore it. They couldn't just sit back and let whatever this was consume them. "Set a course for the signal," Rena ordered, a new determination in her voice. "We're going in. If there's a chance to find answers, we'll take it." As the Vigilance was pulled closer toward the heart of the Shadow, Rena's mind raced. Whoever, or whatever, was sending this signal was still alive, and they might hold the key to understanding the true nature of the threat they were facing. Could it be a fellow human trapped within the entity? Or was it something else, something far worse, trying to lure them deeper into the void? With every second, the vigilance drew closer to the heart of the shadow, closer to the source of the strange signal. And as they entered the unknown, one thing was certain. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to understand the very fabric of reality itself. The vigilance lurched again, its engine struggling against the relentless pull of the singularity at the heart of the shadow. The eerie hum reverberated through the walls, and the walls themselves seemed to ripple as though the fabric of space was being torn apart. The gravity wells were suffocating, but Rena kept her focus fixed on the faint distress signal that echoed through the ship's comm systems. "Captain, we're close to the source," Tessa Markov said, her voice strained as her fingers danced over the console. "Whatever this is, it's coming from deep within the shadow. There's something unnatural about the signal. Almost like it's being fed into the network. Not just a call for help, it's a lure." Rena's heart skipped a beat. A lure? The words hung in the air like a silent warning. Whoever, or whatever, was on the other end of the distress signal was either trapped or manipulating them into a deeper trap. "Keep tracking it, Lieutenant," Rena said, her voice steady but her mind whirring. "We're not turning back now." As the ship fought against the unseen forces pulling them inward, Rena glanced around the bridge. Hale's face was tense as he monitored the ship's systems, his knuckles white as he gripped the console. Every sensor readout was a mess of garbled data, a result of the shadow's interference. But despite it all, Rena could sense the crew's resolve. They had no choice but to move forward. "Captain, I'm detecting a shift in the gravitational field ahead," Hale reported. "Something's changing. The pull is weakening, for now." "Take advantage of it," Rena commanded. "Full speed ahead. But be ready to compensate for any sudden changes in gravity." The vigilance surged forward, and as they approached the heart of the shadow, the stars around them distorted into spirals, stretching and warping as though they were being funneled into a black hole. The ship shuddered again, but this time, the unsettling sensation felt like they were plunging into something even worse than space itself. It was as if they were no longer in the universe they knew. "Visuals on the bridge," Tessa called, her voice tense. "The star maps are all wrong. We're no longer in real space. This is something else." Rena's gaze flicked toward the viewports, her mind racing. The stars around them had completely vanished, replaced by a dark, swirling vortex of indeterminate substance. The darkness inside the shadow seemed to twist and pulse like a living organism. There was no sound, no hum of engines, no creaking of the ship's hull, just the profound, disquieting silence of the void. The distress signal was growing stronger now, more intense, urging them closer. "Something's wrong," Rena muttered, her instincts flaring. "Something about this doesn't feel right. This isn't just a ship. This thing, it's alive." "Captain, we've reached the signal's origin point," Tessa announced, her eyes wide with disbelief. "There's a structure ahead. Looks organic, like it's grown into the very fabric of the shadow." Rena's breath caught in her throat. A structure. The idea was unfathomable. How could a biological structure exist in the heart of such a phenomenon? But the evidence was undeniable. A massive, twisting form was emerging from the center of the swirling vortex, its surface pulsating with a strange, unnatural rhythm. "It's not a ship," Hale whispered, his voice trembling. "It's a living organism. Something that's been here for, how long?" "Longer than we could ever imagine," Rena said under her breath. "Prepare for boarding. We're going in." With every word, the weight of the situation grew heavier. They had reached the center of the shadow, and whatever awaited them now would change everything they knew about the universe, about life, and about their own place in it. The vigilance edged closer, and as they approached the dark mass, an unsettling sensation washed over the crew. The air felt thicker, charged as though the very atmosphere was alive, breathing. There was no denying it now. They were standing at the threshold of something ancient, something far beyond their understanding. "Brace for impact," Rena ordered suddenly, her eyes fixed on the growing structure ahead. The shadow had shifted again, pulling them even closer. A loud, grinding noise filled the ship as they crossed the threshold into the heart of the shadow. The structure in front of them loomed larger, dark, twisted, and pulsating like a massive heart. It wasn't just biological, it was sentient. The walls themselves seemed to react to their presence, vibrating in response to the ship's proximity. "All systems offline," Hale cried out. "We're being pulled in." "Shut everything down," Rena shouted. "Cut all power except for life support." Get us on manual control. The Vigilance's systems began to sputter as Rena's command was carried out, but the gravitational pull was overwhelming. The ship groaned under the strain as they descended into the core of the shadow, the once mighty warship now at the mercy of the vast, unknown entity. Suddenly the entire ship was plunged into darkness. The lights flickered and went out, leaving them in a void more profound than any darkness they had ever known. The only sound was the faint hum of the ship's life support systems. "Captain." Tessa's voice broke through the stillness, a faint tremor in it. "There's something moving inside the structure. It's alive." Rena's heart pounded in her chest. "Get us out of here now," she whispered, though deep down she knew it was too late. They had entered the lair of something far beyond human comprehension. Something ancient, powerful, and merciless. As the ship continued to drift deeper into the heart of the shadow, the reality of the situation finally hit home. The creature that had attacked them, that had lured them here, was not just a force of nature. It was a consciousness, a being that had been watching, waiting. And now they were in its grip. The darkness inside the shadow was suffocating. The Vigilance drifted silently, her systems crippled and her crew tense, waiting for something, anything, to happen. The once gleaming warship was now little more than a lifeless hulk, a toy in the hands of a creature far older and more powerful than humanity could ever have anticipated. "All systems are down," Hale said, his voice flat, almost resigned. "The gravity wells, they're messing with our entire energy grid. We're lucky we still have life support." Rena's eyes darted over the bridge. The crew were working in silence, their faces illuminated by the flickering emergency lights. Every one of them knew that they were at the mercy of something they could not understand. But Rena refused to let the fear show. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the realization that they were no longer in control, but they hadn't come this far to give up. "We're not dead yet," Rena said, her voice hard. "Stay focused." "Tessa, any sign of the distress signal?" Tessa Markov's fingers moved quickly over her console, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's still there, Captain," she said. "Stronger than before. But it's different now. It's almost like it's speaking to us." "Speaking?" Rena echoed. "What do you mean, speaking?" Tessa hesitated, the hair on the back of her neck prickling. I don't know how to explain it. The signal's got a pattern now, like it's trying to communicate, but the language is not human. Can you isolate it?" Rena demanded. "Yes, Captain. I'll try." The bridge fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the soft clicking of keys as Tessa worked. Rena's mind raced. What could possibly be behind this? Was the signal really a trap? Or was there someone, alive within this thing trying to warn them, or worse, trying to manipulate them? Suddenly, the speakers on the bridge crackled to life, cutting through the silence. A low, reverberating hum filled the air, like the sound of distant thunder. Rena's pulse quickened as the voice emerged, soft at first, then growing louder and clearer, its tone deep and unnatural. "Welcome." The voice was not human. It was as if the words were being drawn from the very fabric of space itself. There was no warmth, no emotion, just an overwhelming sense of power. "We are the shadow. You are the unwelcome ones." Rena's stomach twisted. What is this?" she whispered under her breath. The voice continued, the words slow and deliberate. "You do not belong. You are new." "Captain, it's speaking directly to us," Tessa said, her voice trembling with disbelief. It knows we're here." Rena's eyes narrowed. She had suspected it all along. This wasn't just a ship. It was a mind, a sentient being that had lived for eons in the depths of the void, and now it was aware of their presence, aware of them. "Your ship, your kind?" The voice was growing stronger, more forceful now. "You are but a flicker in the vastness of existence. You do not know what you are facing. Shut it off." Rena barked, her frustration mounting. She didn't know if the voice was an enemy or an ally, but she didn't have time to find out. "Tessa, cut the feed." Tessa frantically slammed a button on her console. "I can't. The system is locked. We're being absorbed. This thing, it's controlling our communications. It's too powerful." The voice grew darker. "We will not allow you to leave. You will become part of us." Rena's heart skipped a beat. This was no longer a fight for survival. It was a fight for their very souls. If they could not break free from the influence of the shadow, they would be consumed by it, their minds and bodies twisted into whatever this entity wished them to be. "We need to get out of here now," Rena shouted. "Full emergency protocol. Get the auxiliary power back online. All hands prepare for extraction." We're leaving this thing. But just as Rena issued her command, the Vigilance jerked violently. The entire ship rattled as if something enormous was pushing against them. Rena felt her heart skip a beat as she stumbled to the console. The shadow was not letting go. It was holding them in its grasp, and now it was pulling them deeper. "Captain?" Hale shouted, his face ashen. "The gravity wells are increasing. It's pulling us in. We're losing power faster than we can compensate. We can't fight this much longer." Desperation clawed at Rena's chest, but she couldn't give in. She couldn't allow the shadow to consume them. She glanced at her crew, their faces tight with fear, but they were all waiting for her to make a decision. "We won't survive if we stay here," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We need to take a risk. Tessa, can you override the power systems? We need to force an escape." "I can try," Tessa said, her fingers flying over the console once more. "But it's going to be a long shot." Rena nodded. "Do it." The ship lurched again, this time harder than before. Rena braced herself, feeling the pull of the shadow growing stronger, dragging them further toward its center. In that moment, Rena realized the true scale of the danger they were facing. The shadow was alive, and it wasn't just some alien entity, it was something that had been waiting, watching for eons. And now it had found them. The Vigilance wasn't just trapped in space. They were trapped in a being's mind, caught in a living nightmare. "Captain," Hale called urgently, his voice shaking. "We need to make a choice. It's either escape now or become part of it." Rena's eyes met his. The shadow had already taken too much from them. But they were not done yet. They would fight for their survival no matter the cost. She wasn't about to let it claim their ship, or their future. "Prepare for everything," Rena said with grim determination. "We're not giving up. We're getting out of here. Now." And with that, the final desperate push for freedom began. The Vigilance creaked and groaned under the strain, the hull shuddering with each violent pull from the heart of the shadow. Captain Rena Yarrow stood firm at the center of the bridge, her eyes sharp, every muscle tense with the weight of the moment. The ship was caught in the deadly grip of an entity that had no right to exist. It was a predator, and they were nothing more than prey. But she refused to be consumed. "Tessa," Rena's voice cut through the chaos. "Any progress on those overrides?" "I'm trying, Captain." Tessa Markov's voice was strained, her fingers flying across the console in a blur. "The shadow's interference is like nothing I've ever seen. I'm fighting against something alive. It knows what I'm doing. Every time I bypass one system, another locks down." "Keep at it," Rena ordered, her eyes scanning the readouts flashing across the screen. "We're running out of time. Hale, can we reroute any power to the engines? We need to break free now." Hale's hands were shaking as he worked to keep the Vigilance's systems from fully collapsing. "We're fighting a losing battle here, Captain. I can reroute some power, but it'll only be enough for a few seconds. The shadow's gravity wells are tearing apart our systems faster than we can repair them. I don't know how long we can hold out." Rena's gaze tightened, her knuckles white on the edge of her command chair. They were in the shadow of a nightmare, and every moment they lingered in its grasp, the more the Vigilance would be consumed. She had to make a choice. "Give me those few seconds," Rena said, her voice cold with resolve. "Do whatever you can. We're going to push through." A tremor of uncertainty ran through the crew, but they knew the captain had made her decision. There was no more room for hesitation. Tessa's voice broke through the silence, quieter now. "Captain, it's working. The bypass is holding. But there's something else, something inside the shadow near the center. It's alive. It's calling to us." Rena's mind raced. "What is it, Tessa? What are you seeing?" "I can't explain it," Tessa said, fear creeping into her voice. "It's like a voice inside our heads, inside the ship. It's trying to connect with us. It's pulling at our minds." Rena's stomach twisted. The shadow was more than just a ship, more than just a mind, it was a presence. A consciousness trying to assimilate them, to fold their reality into its own. "Ignore it," Rena barked. "Focus on breaking free. We need to escape." The tension in the air thickened as the gravity wells grew even stronger. Outside the viewport, the vortex of darkness swirled violently, the tendrils of the shadow reaching out like monstrous claws, trying to drag the ship further into its depths. The massive, organic structure loomed ominously ahead, pulsing with dark energy. "Power to engines now," Hale shouted as he slammed the control panel, pushing every last ounce of energy to the ship's thrusters. Come on, come on." The Vigilance shuddered violently as it attempted to move against the unrelenting force. For a moment Rena thought it would fail. But then a low hum surged through the ship, weak but present. The engines, battered and strained, responded. Slowly at first and then faster, the ship jerked forward. Yes. Hale shouted, relief flooding his voice. We're breaking free. The pull of the shadow began to weaken as the Vigilance's engines fought to push them away. But just as they seemed to make a break for it, the entire ship was rocked by a deafening blast. The walls trembled and sparks flew from the control panels. Rena felt the deck beneath her feet shift, and the crew scrambled to maintain control. Damage report. Rena ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. Shields are down. Tessa called out. Hull integrity is holding, but we've lost most of our aft thrusters. We're coasting, Captain. We can't break free completely. Rena cursed under her breath. They were out of the immediate pull of the shadow, but they were still far from safe. The gravitational field still held them, weakly now, but they needed to distance themselves completely if they were to survive. Get those thrusters back online, Rena ordered, gripping the armrests of her chair. We can't afford to coast. We need full power. As Tessa scrambled to reactivate the thrusters, Rena's eyes flicked to the viewscreen again. The darkness of the shadow still loomed behind them, its massive form shifting and changing, as if the very concept of space within it had a life of its own. The voice returned, booming in their ears, a low, menacing whisper that vibrated through the hull. You cannot escape. Rena's spine stiffened. The shadow was not letting go. But she wasn't done yet. Keep going. Rena snapped. We'll fight it until the last breath. Just as hope seemed to fade, the ship's console lit up with a new signal. It was faint, encrypted, and unlike anything they had encountered before. Captain, there's something else. Tessa exclaimed. Another ship. No, not a ship, a station. It's hidden inside the shadow. The distress signal, it's coming from there. It's human. Rena's heart skipped. A human? Inside the heart of the shadow? How far? She asked urgently. Not far, Tessa replied, her voice filled with disbelief. It's on a trajectory we can reach, if we can just get enough power. Rena glanced around at her crew, their faces set with determination. They were close, but they weren't out of danger yet. The shadow was still hunting them, still watching. The next few moments would determine whether they lived or became part of this living nightmare. Then we go after it, Rena said, her voice low but firm. We find out who's down there and get the hell out. If we survive this, we'll have answers. They weren't just running now. They were charging into the heart of the unknown, toward what could be the key to defeating the shadow, or perhaps the last step toward their doom. Full power to engines, Rena commanded, her voice resolute. Head toward the station. We're not finished yet. The Vigilance lurched forward again, engines straining, the dark form of the shadow hanging behind them like a beast that would never release its grip. But Rena was no longer afraid. She had made a choice, they would fight no matter what. And if there was a way out of this nightmare, she would find it. The Vigilance surged forward, its hull groaning as it fought against the encroaching darkness. The shadow still loomed behind them, its pull weakening but ever present. The tension in the bridge was palpable, every member of the crew working furiously to keep the ship on course. Rena Yarrow's mind raced as the faint signal from the human station drew closer, pulsing through the distorted void of the shadow like a beacon of hope. How far, Tessa? Rena asked, her voice tight but determined. Tessa Markov's hands danced across the console, eyes scanning the readouts. We're less than 15 minutes away. But I can't guarantee we'll have a clear path. The shadow's interference is unpredictable. Every time we make a move, it tries to push us off course. And if it catches us again, it could be game over. Not an option, Rena replied, jaw set. We fight until the end. Make sure we're ready for anything. Hale's voice cut in from the aft. Captain, we're down to less than 20% auxiliary power. The strain is killing us. I can't keep the engines at full throttle much longer. Rena cursed under her breath. The shadow was relentless, its presence pressing in on them from all sides, and now their ship was starting to feel the effects of prolonged exposure. They had been pushing the Vigilance to her limits for hours, and every second in the heart of this dark entity made their survival that much less likely. Still, they had no choice. We just need to make it to the station, Rena muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. Just a little longer. The crew continued to work in silence, the only sounds the rhythmic tapping of fingers against consoles and the low hum of the dying engines. Time seemed to stretch as they drew closer to the station, the minutes slipping by like hours. Then suddenly Tessa's voice broke the stillness. Captain. The station. It's appearing on my scanners. It's not much more than a floating wreck. Looks like it's been here for a while. Rena's eyes flicked to the view screen, where a faint glow emerged from the abyss. The station, or what remained of it, was a skeletal structure. Once it might have been an outpost, sleek, efficient, but now it appeared ravaged. Sections of its outer hull had been torn open, and the once pristine surface was now covered in what looked like jagged scars. It hung in the darkness like a forgotten relic, an ancient witness to a long-lost story. "Bring us in slowly, Tessa," Rena said, her eyes narrowing. "We don't know what we're walking into." Tessa nodded, fingers moving with precision. "I've got it. We're coming in, gently." The Vigilance drifted toward the station, the gravity wells still pulling at them, but the ship's systems barely responding. As they closed the distance, Rena's heart began to race. There had to be survivors inside, or at least answers. She couldn't allow this to be another dead end. The hope of human life, of a chance to escape the shadow, was all that kept her moving forward. "Any life signs?" Rena asked, her voice filled with urgency. Tessa shook her head. "Nothing. It's like the station is dead. But I'm picking up a transmission. Weak but active. It's definitely human. And it's coming from inside the station." Rena's pulse quickened. "Can you boost the signal?" "I'm trying," Tessa said, her brow furrowing. "But the shadow's interference is warping the transmission. It's encrypted. I can't decipher it yet." "Break through it," Rena ordered. "Whatever it takes. We need to know what's inside that station. Get us through that signal." Tessa nodded, her fingers flying over the console. "I'll see what I can do. But it's going to take time." Suddenly the ship shuddered, a deep groan reverberating through the hull. The Vigilance's systems flickered, and the low, eerie hum of the shadow intensified. The ship was fighting to hold together. "Captain, the shadow is tightening its grip again," Hale shouted. "It's not letting us go. We're losing momentum." Rena's eyes widened, and she slammed her fist on the armrest. "We can't let it drag us back. Tessa, do you have the encryption?" Tessa's face was pale, her brow glistening with sweat as she struggled with the systems. I'm almost through," she gasped. "But we don't have much time. The shadow is pulling us in. It's going to be a matter of seconds before it completely overwhelms our engines." A new thought struck Rena, one that made her stomach twist with unease. Could the station be alive? Could it be another part of the shadow? Tessa shook her head quickly. "I don't think so, Captain. It's definitely human-made, designed to withstand deep space travel. But something's happened to it. Whatever it is, it's been here far too long." "Keep working, Tessa," Rena said, her voice strained with tension. "We need answers. Whatever's inside that station is our lifeline." Minutes felt like hours as the crew fought to hold the Vigilance steady against the pull of the shadow. The station grew larger on the view screen, its damaged form slowly coming into sharper focus. Then at last Tessa spoke up, her voice filled with a mix of relief and apprehension. "I've cracked the encryption. The transmission, it's a distress message, but it's fragmented. Pieces of it are corrupted. However, I can make out part of it." "Play it," Rena demanded, her heart pounding in her chest. The room fell silent as the static cleared, and a voice emerged. A voice ragged and exhausted, filled with years of isolation and desperation. "To anyone out there, this is Captain Elise Asher of the station." The voice broke off and there was a crackle of interference. "We are deep within the shadow, cannot leave, must stop it." Rena's breath caught in her throat. "Stop it? What is she talking about? What does she mean, stop it?" But the transmission cut off abruptly and all that was left was static. Tessa's fingers flew over the console again. "Captain, I'm trying to isolate the source of the transmission, but..." Before she could finish, the Vigilance shook violently again, the ship groaning under an immense force. The gravity wells were growing stronger and Rena knew it. The shadow wasn't just pulling them in, it was trying to crush them. "We need to board that station now," Rena barked. "Prepare for docking. We can't afford to wait any longer." The crew scrambled into action, their faces grim. The station was their last chance for survival, and Rena could feel the weight of that truth pressing down on her. If Captain Elise Asher was alive, she had answers. And if she wasn't, then this was all they had left. As the Vigilance drew closer to the station, Rena's eyes narrowed with determination. They weren't just running from the shadow anymore, they were heading straight into its heart. And whatever awaited them inside that station, they would face it together. The Vigilance docked with a soft thud against the damaged station. Rena Yarrow stood at the front of the bridge, her face pale, her heart racing as the ship's engines sputtered to a halt. The crew remained silent, each person feeling the weight of what they were about to do. The shadow had already nearly consumed them. Now they were about to board a forgotten outpost, possibly the last remnants of humanity in this cursed place, to find answers or perish trying. "Captain," Tessa Markov said, her voice tight with urgency. "I'm still picking up a weak signal. It's coming from deep inside the station. There's a power source there still active." "Then that's where we go," Rena replied, her voice low and unwavering. She turned to face her crew. "We have no choice but to push forward. We know the shadow is closing in on us. There's no way to run anymore. Our only chance is to find out what this station is hiding." "Understood, Captain," Hale replied, the grim determination in his eyes matching Rena's. Without further hesitation, the crew grabbed their gear and Rena led them to the airlock. The station's exterior was scarred, twisted by time and the ravaging forces of the shadow, but there were still signs of life, however faint. As the airlock opened with a hiss, the crew stepped out into the derelict station, the dim lights flickering intermittently in the corridors. Rena's heart pounded in her chest as they moved through the narrow, claustrophobic hallways. The station smelled stale, metallic, a haunting reminder of how long it had been abandoned, or perhaps trapped, here. The oppressive atmosphere felt like a weight on their shoulders, pressing in from all sides. And still, the presence of the shadow lingered, its energy pulling at their minds, trying to draw them into its all-consuming darkness. "We need to find the source of that transmission," Rena said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "It came from deep within the station. Let's move out." The corridors twisted like a labyrinth, each turn leading them further into the heart of the station. The crew moved cautiously, rifles in hand, knowing that any misstep could be their last. Tessa, who had managed to isolate the transmission source, led the way, her eyes darting between the dimly lit control panels and the eerie silence that surrounded them. Suddenly, a low hum echoed through the station, and the walls seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Rena froze, her hand raised, signaling for the crew to stop. "What the hell is that?" Hale whispered. "I'm not sure," Rena said, her mind racing. "But we're getting closer. The signal's stronger now. Keep your guard up." They pushed forward, passing abandoned rooms and hollowed-out hallways until they reached a massive chamber at the station's core. In the center of the room stood an enormous structure, a dark, crystalline object that hummed with the same energy as the station. The air around it crackled with unnatural power. And then, as if responding to their presence, the object pulsed, sending out a wave of energy that sent a chill through their bones. "Captain, it's alive," Tessa murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's connected to the shadow. This thing, it's controlling it." Rena's eyes narrowed as she stepped closer. There, amidst the pulsing energy, a figure appeared. She was cloaked in shadow, her form barely visible against the darkness, but Rena could make out the outline of a woman, standing tall and resolute. It was her, Captain Elise Asher, the voice from the transmission. "Who are you?" Rena demanded, her voice cold but commanding. "What is this place? What is the shadow?" Asher's figure stepped forward, the air around her warping with the same dark energy. Her voice was strained, her tone full of grief and fear. "The shadow is not just an entity," she began, her words filled with pain. "It's a prison, a sentient void that consumes everything it touches. It's been growing for millennia and now it's reaching out, pulling in everything, everyone, it can. It's not just a ship or a being. It's a force, a hunger that feeds on life itself." Rena's pulse quickened. "And you? You've been here trapped?" Asher nodded slowly. "I was the captain of this station when we stumbled upon the shadow. We thought it was an anomaly, something we could study. We didn't understand what it was or what it would do to us. The shadow uses you, manipulates you. It infiltrates your mind, twists you into a tool for its growth. The only way to stop it is to destroy its core. But I've been here too long. I can't do it alone." Rena's heart sank. "You're saying we have to destroy this thing?" "Yes," Asher replied. "But it's not just the shadow you have to destroy, it's the thing controlling it, the core at the center of its heart. I tried to stop it, but I was too weak. The station, this place, is the last piece of the puzzle. You have to shut it down from within." Rena stood silent, absorbing the weight of Asher's words. The shadow wasn't just a threat to them, it was a sentient parasite, slowly consuming everything. And now it had reached out, pulling them in. But they had one shot, one final chance to end it. Asher continued, her voice growing fainter as if the power of the shadow was already taking its toll on her. "I can't help you anymore. The shadow has consumed me, but you can still stop it. The station's core is the key. Destroy it and the shadow will be weak. It will fall apart, unable to sustain itself. If you fail, everyone will be lost. Rena's mind raced. This was it. They had no choice but to face the heart of the shadow, to destroy the core that kept it alive, or watch as it consumed everything. We will do this, Rena said, her voice resolute. We won't let the shadow win. With one last glance at Captain Asher, whose form had begun to fade into the darkness, Rena turned to her crew. Get ready. We're going in. We end this now. The crew nodded, their faces set with grim determination. They would not give up. Not now. Not when they were so close. As Rena and her team moved toward the heart of the station, toward the core that pulsed with dark energy, they knew one thing for sure. The shadow would not claim them. They would face it head-on and fight for their survival. And for humanity's future. End of Warships of the Infinite Void, confronting the shadows of space in a fight for survival.